Hannah didn't hear a scream, didn't hear a gunshot, didn't even hear a struggle. That's the kind of trap that works best. 1 minute Jacob was at the doorway straightening his shirt like a man with plans. The next minute he was swallowed by Memphis night and the city kept breathing like nothing got stolen. 9 o'clock, May 1st, 1866, South Street. A rented room that still smelled like other people's lives. Thin walls, one chair. A corner where Hannah kept their few things stacked neat like order could protect them now. Jacob kissed her the way a tired man kisses hope. Quick, warm, certain. "I'll be back by daylight," he said. He said it every night since they arrived. 3 weeks of dock work loading cotton bales onto steamboats headed downriver. Honest labor. Heavy labor. The kind of job a free man takes when he's trying to prove he belongs in the world that pretends it's changed. Memphis was supposed to be different. Union flags, soldiers, a city that had been under federal boots for years. Folks told them freedom could breathe here, that the old plantation rules couldn't reach this far into town. Hannah wanted to believe that. She needed to. Because 8 months earlier they were still counted like tools, still moved when someone else decided, still surviving on permission. Now they were in a city with street names and paydays and the dangerous idea that tomorrow could be theirs. Jacob stepped out, and the latch clicked. Hannah held the quiet for a second, listening to his footsteps fade. Then she went to the window and watched shadows move across the street, the way you do when you've learned the world can change its mind about you without warning. By dawn, the room felt wrong. Not empty, haunted. 6 o'clock came and went. Hannah's worry had teeth now. By 8 she was dressed and moving. By noon she was at the docks with dust on her shoes and fear rising in her throat like bile. The foreman didn't even pretend to care. White man, thick hands, busy eyes. The kind of man who measured people by what they could lift. "Your husband didn't show," he said. Hannah leaned forward. "He left at 9. He was coming here." The foreman shrugged like the truth was a nuisance. "Then he missed his pay. If he misses again, he's done. Plenty of men want work." That's when Hannah understood something about freedom in places like this. It had conditions. It had a timer. And it could be revoked the moment a white man decided you were inconvenient. She spent the day walking every street between South Street and the river, asking questions until her voice got dry. Some people shook their heads and kept going. Some looked at her with that careful pity that says, "I know what happened, but I like my life too much to say it out loud." One older woman grabbed Hannah's sleeve and hissed like she was warning her about a snake. "Stop asking, baby. Police been snatching folks." Hannah's stomach tightened. Snatching, that wasn't an arrest, that was a disappearance. Hannah went anyway because love makes you do stupid things, brave things, same difference. The police station on Adams Street looked official enough to fool people who hadn't been burned before. Brick, desk, men with badges acting like the city belonged to them. A young officer sat behind the counter, mustache thin, eyes half asleep like black pain was boring. Hannah kept her voice steady. "My husband is missing, Jacob Blackwell. He left for work last night and never arrived." The officer didn't even look up at first. Maybe he ran off. Hannah stared. Ran off where? He finally raised his eyes and his expression carried something ugly and casual. "Colored men do that. Get tired. Start over." It hit Hannah like a slap, not because it was clever but because it was practiced. A ready-made lie. A drawer full of excuses used to bury people without digging a grave. "He wouldn't," Hannah said, and she felt anger try to climb into her voice. The officer leaned in, sensing it. "You got proof you're married." Hannah's throat tightened. A plantation marriage, spoken in secret. Vows whispered under a sky that didn't offer protection. No license, no courthouse, no paper. The officer's mouth curved like he'd just won something. Thought so. He tapped his pen like this was paperwork, not a life. "I'll make a note, but don't expect miracles." Hannah wanted to reach across that counter and shake him until he remembered Jacob was a human being. But Hannah knew the chessboard. You don't swing at a man holding the rules. You don't give him the excuse he's hungry for. So she swallowed her rage, thanked him like she was the one asking for a favor, and stepped back into the street with her heart pounding. She didn't know Jacob was already dead. Didn't know his body would end up in the river, dragged down like a secret nobody wanted floating back up. Didn't know he'd been stopped blocks from home, not by chance but because someone had decided certain men were profitable. Men like Jacob, young enough to work, strong enough to sell, alone enough to erase. Hannah didn't know that yet, but the city knew, and the city was watching to see if she'd be quiet. She was. That's what made her dangerous. She went back to their room at dusk with raw feet and no answers. She shut the door and leaned against it like the wood could hold the world outside. Then she heard the softest knock. Not loud, not official, careful. Hannah opened the door a crack and saw an older woman standing there, eyes tired like they'd been carrying grief for weeks. The woman stepped in without waiting to be invited, voice low. "You've been asking about your husband," she said. "You need to stop before you disappear too." Hannah's chest tightened. "Who are you?" The woman looked at her like she was choosing truth over safety. "My name is Esther," she said. "They took my boy." Something in Hannah went cold. Esther didn't sit, didn't waste time. 7 men, she continued. Now 8, all taken at night, all by men wearing badges, and none of them ever make it into a jail book. Hannah's knees weakened. She grabbed the chair and sat hard. "You're saying the police." Esther cut her off. "I'm saying the same men who used to hunt us for a living never stopped hunting. They just learned a new uniform." Hannah's mouth went dry. "Do you know where Jacob is?" Esther hesitated, then nodded once. "I got a witness," she said. "A boy who followed the wagon." Hannah leaned forward so fast the chair scraped. "A boy saw where they took him." Esther's eyes stayed locked on Hannah's. "South of the city," she said. "Old warehouse by the river," and the boy heard screaming. Hannah's vision narrowed. Warehouse, river, screaming. This wasn't an arrest. This was a business. Hannah stood up, hands trembling, not from fear but from the sudden shape of what she was facing. "We go to the army," Hannah said. "The bureau, somebody." Esther shook her head slowly. "I tried," she said. "They got excuses stacked higher than cotton. Jurisdiction, procedure, paperwork." Esther stepped closer, voice turning sharp with urgency. "So here's the truth, Hannah. Out there the badge is the weapon, and the law is the alibi. That means we're on our own." Silence filled the room like smoke. Hannah felt something harden in her chest. "What's the boy's name?" she asked. Esther's eyes flicked toward the window like she didn't want to say it too loud. "Isaiah," she said. "He's young, hungry, no family, which makes him brave or makes him easy to bury." Hannah nodded. Then she said the words that changed everything. "Take me to him." Esther didn't answer right away. She studied Hannah, measuring what kind of woman this was. A woman who would accept the loss, or a woman who would kick the door in and force the city to look. Esther finally spoke, and her voice was almost a whisper. "If we go near that warehouse," she said, "and they see us, they won't just take you." Hannah's eyes didn't move. "They'll make sure you never become a question again." Hannah stepped closer, lowering her voice until it was steel. "Then we better move before they sell my husband like he's still property." And outside, somewhere in the dark, a police wagon rolled through Memphis like it owned the night, headed toward another block, another target, another man who thought freedom meant safety. Isaiah didn't knock on Esther's door. He hovered outside it like a boy who'd learned doors can be traps. When Esther brought Hannah down the hall, Isaiah was sitting on the stair, elbows on knees, eyes fixed on the street through a crack in the window. 16 maybe, skinny in the way hunger makes you sharp, the kind of kid who survives by noticing what other people miss. He looked up at Hannah and didn't smile. "You his wife?" he asked. Hannah nodded once. Isaiah swallowed like he regretted following that wagon, like he wished he could put the whole night back where it belonged. "I saw where they took him," he said. "But you ain't gonna like it." Hannah stepped closer. "Tell me anyway." Isaiah exhaled through his nose, thinking. "They stopped him near South Street," he said. "Not like a real arrest. They didn't argue long, just grabbed him and put him in the wagon." And the wagon didn't go to the station. Hannah's stomach tightened. Where'd it go? She asked. Isaiah glanced at Esther first like he needed permission to say it out loud. South, he said, toward the river, past where folks don't walk unless they got a reason. Old warehouse ground looks dead, but it ain't dead. Hannah felt her throat go dry. You saw him go inside. Isaiah nodded. Two men came out, not in uniform, work boots, hard faces. They pulled him out like he was a sack. Hannah's hands curled into fists. Did he fight? She asked. Isaiah hesitated. He talked, said he was going to work, said he didn't do nothing. Isaiah's eyes flicked away for half a second. And it didn't matter, he added. That was the part Hannah already knew. The part she'd been trying not to admit. She looked at Esther. We go to the army now. Esther's expression stayed heavy. You think they don't know? Esther said. You think this kind of thing happens without somebody upstairs deciding to look the other way? Hannah shook her head hard. Then we go louder, we go to everybody. Esther stepped in close, voice low and sharp. Loud gets you killed when the badge is the gun, she said. You want your husband back, we need proof that makes the whole city flinch. Hannah stared at her. What proof? She asked. Esther didn't blink. Something they can't laugh off, something that doesn't need a black woman's word to be believed. Isaiah stood up restless. I saw something through a window, he said. Not clear, but I saw bars like cages. What? Hannah froze. Cages. That word doesn't belong in a free city. That word belongs to old money and old cruelty. Esther's jaw tightened like she'd been waiting for someone else to confirm what her mind already knew. Listen, Esther said. This didn't start with your Jacob, it's been happening. She walked to a small table and pulled out scraps of paper, names, dates, streets written in careful handwriting. March, she said. Then April, young men, healthy, always at night. Always the same few officers roaming the 4th Ward like it belongs to them. Hannah's eyes moved over the names. Each one felt like a missing heartbeat. And none of them got booked, Esther added. No jail logs, no charges, no paperwork. Isaiah whispered almost to himself, so they didn't arrest them. What? Esther looked right at Hannah. They abducted them, she said, and if they're doing that, there's only one reason. Hannah's voice came out thin. Money. Esther nodded. And control, but mostly money. Hannah turned toward the window. Memphis looked normal from up here. People walking, smoke from chimneys, wagons rolling. A city pretending it wasn't built on selling bodies. She thought about Jacob kissing her goodbye, thought about his hands calloused, honest, thought about him chained under a river, a secret weighted down so it couldn't talk. Something in her face hardened. Take me there, Hannah said. Isaiah's head snapped toward her. No, that place. I didn't ask if it was safe, Hannah said. I asked you to take me. Esther grabbed Hannah's arm. You go out there and get caught, they'll take you too, she warned. And once you're gone, nobody left to keep asking. Hannah pulled free gently, not disrespectful, just decided. If I do nothing, my husband disappears into somebody else's life, she said. That's a death anyway. Isaiah's eyes darted, thinking. You ain't got papers, he asked. Hannah shook her head. Isaiah let out a bitter little laugh. Of course you don't. That's what made it easy. That's what made the city a hunting ground. Freedom without documentation is just a rumor. Esther stared at Hannah like she was looking at her younger self. Tonight, Esther said finally, we don't rush. We don't run blind. We watch. We count. We see who comes and goes. We learn the rhythm. Hannah nodded. Tonight, she said, I'm not a grieving wife. Esther lifted an eyebrow. Hannah's voice dropped into something colder. Tonight, Hannah said, I'm a problem. Isaiah swallowed. If we do this, we do it quiet, we do it smart. Esther nodded. We do it like people who understand the whole city might be in on it. Hannah looked from Esther to Isaiah. Then we move like shadows, she said, and we come back with something they can't bury. They agreed to leave separately after dark. No walking together. No pattern. Meet near the trees a quarter-mile out. As Hannah stepped back into her room to change, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. A small scrape on the doorframe, fresh, like a mark, like someone had leaned close listening. Hannah's stomach dropped. Because if that mark wasn't there yesterday, then somebody had already been watching her. And if the police were listening, then tonight wasn't just an investigation, it was a race. The night didn't have a moon. That's how Hannah knew God wasn't trying to help anybody. She left her room first alone, dressed like a dockhand instead of a wife. Men's trousers borrowed from Esther, shirt tucked in tight, hair wrapped. No jewelry, nothing that said her name out loud. She moved through the fourth ward like she belonged to the dark. Every step felt loud. Every corner felt watched. Memphis at night had a different posture. The city leaned forward, listening. Wagons rolled slower. Laughter came sharp and quick, then disappeared. Somewhere in the distance, a police whistle blew once. Not urgent. Just enough to remind people who owned the hours after sundown. Hannah didn't look back. She didn't want to see if anyone was following. Isaiah came from the opposite direction, appearing out of nothing like kids who grow up surviving do. He didn't greet her, didn't slow down, just turned and kept walking, trusting she'd fall in beside him without words. They didn't speak until they reached the trees, a thin grove, half dead, forgotten land where the city stopped pretending it cared. The river smell hung heavy here, damp and metallic like rusted chains. Isaiah crouched low, eyes fixed ahead. "From here on," he whispered, "we breathe quiet." Hannah nodded. They moved through brush and broken ground, careful where they placed their feet. Old glass, rotten boards. The leftovers of a city that burned things and never cleaned up. Then Hannah saw it, the warehouse. Low, wide, squatting near the river like it was waiting. One building lit from the inside with a sick yellow glow. Oil lamps, not bright enough to feel safe, just bright enough to see suffering. Two wagons stood outside, horses hitched, nervous, shifting their weight like they knew what kind of work happened here. Isaiah pulled Hannah down behind a fallen log. "Wait," he whispered. They watched. Minutes stretched. Hannah's pulse counted time better than any clock. Then the door opened. 3 white men stepped out, laughing easy. No urgency, no fear. The confidence of men who knew the law would never touch them. Hannah's chest tightened. One of them turned, and even in low light she recognized him, the desk officer, the one who'd smirked when she couldn't prove her marriage. No badge now, no uniform, just a man who knew when he could take the mask off. "They're coming back," Isaiah whispered. "Going hunting." The men climbed into one wagon and rolled toward the city. The other wagon stayed, so did the lights. Hannah's mind raced. Less guards, fewer eyes, opportunity. Isaiah grabbed her sleeve. "Don't," he whispered, reading her face. "We came to watch." "My husband is in there," Hannah said, voice barely air. "I'm not watching him disappear." Isaiah's jaw clenched. They waited 10 more minutes, then another 5. Nothing. Hannah crawled along the warehouse wall, feeling the wood under her fingers, old, soft in places. She found a small side door near the back, hanging wrong, unlocked. The kind of door that tells you this place doesn't expect resistance. She turned back to Isaiah. "If I don't come out." "I know," he cut in. "I go to Esther." Hannah squeezed his hand once. Then she slipped inside. The smell hit her first. Sweat, blood, waste, fear. Fear has a smell. People who have lived it know. The light was low but enough. Cages, iron bars bolted into the floor, men inside them, black men, too many, some sitting, some lying down like they'd given up arguing with their bodies, bruises on faces, shirts torn, one man rocking slightly, whispering to himself. Hannah's breath caught. Then she saw Jacob, far side, back against the bars, head down. Alive, her knees nearly gave out. She forced herself to stay low, moving along the wall. Near the center of the room sat a desk. Behind it, a man writing. Calm, careful, like he was balancing books at a dry goods store instead of cataloging stolen lives. On the wall behind him hung keys, a heavy ring of them. Hannah felt time narrow. This was it. She waited. The man muttered as he wrote, names, descriptions, numbers. Hannah crept forward, heartbeat in her ears. 5 steps, 4, 3. Her fingers closed around the key ring. Metal whispered too loud. The man stopped writing. Silence slammed into the room. "Samuel," the man called, "you back already?" Hannah pressed against the desk, not breathing. The chair scraped as the man stood. He was about to turn, then from outside, "Frank, get out here." A voice sharp, annoyed. Horse threw a shoe. The man cursed under his breath, grabbed a lamp and headed toward the door. The moment it shut, Hannah moved. She grabbed the ledger off the desk and ran. Jacob looked up as she reached his cage, eyes wide like he was seeing a ghost. "Hannah," he whispered. She unlocked the cage with shaking hands. "Don't talk," she said. "Move." The lock clicked. Jacob was out. She didn't stop. She unlocked another cage, then another. Men stared at her like they didn't trust hope anymore. "Quiet," she whispered. "Back door now." Too late. The main door slammed open, boots, voices, and one man stepping in front, calm as judgment, Captain Mercer, dark suit, pistol in hand, eyes cold. "Well," he said softly, "this explains the noise." Jacob stepped in front of Hannah without thinking. Mercer's gaze flicked to the ledger in her arms. "That book belongs to me," he said, "and so do they." Hannah felt the room tighten. Mercer smiled. "Slavery never left," he said. "It just learned new paperwork." He raised the gun, and in that frozen second Hannah understood something terrible. This wasn't about Jacob. This was about whether anyone would ever walk free again. The gun fired, and the warehouse exploded into chaos. Hannah thought distance would quiet it. New streets, new air, a place where nobody knew her name or the sound of Jacob's boots on wooden floors. Illinois gave them work, gave them a house with real walls and neighbors who nodded instead of stared. Jacob learned carpentry, honest again. Building things instead of being stacked like cargo. On the surface, they won. But the game doesn't end just because you leave the board. At night, Hannah still listened for wagons. She still woke up at the sound of wood popping in the cold, her mind racing back to firelight and iron bars. Some scars don't show because they learned how to hide. Esther stayed behind. Someone had to. She buried the dead when the city wouldn't. She wrote names when officials wrote excuses. She walked into offices where white men sighed when they saw her coming, and she came back the next day anyway. They called her difficult. She called it memory. Isaiah went west years later, chasing land and air that didn't smell like smoke. Before he left, he hugged Hannah once, awkward and quick. "I don't like witnesses," he said. "I know," Hannah replied. That ledger followed her even when it wasn't in her hands. It sat in government rooms, stamped and cited, dragged out when men in suits needed proof that something terrible once happened. Then it went quiet again. That's how power works. It doesn't argue forever, it waits. Years later, Hannah read a small notice in a newspaper. Alabama, sheriff appointed. Name familiar enough to make her stop breathing for a second. William Mercer. Different town, same age, same calm authority, same kind of man. She folded the paper carefully and placed it in a drawer. Jacob watched her, already knowing. "He's still out there," he said. "Yes," Hannah replied, "and so are others." She understood then what freedom really meant. Not safety. Vigilance, not peace, memory. Because the men who learn their power hunting bodies don't forget how it feels to hold it. They just rename it, rebadge it, reissue it. Hannah taught her children how to read. She taught them how to speak carefully. And she taught them something else too, something the city of Memphis had taught her in blood and fire. Never believe the game is over just because the rules changed. Somebody is always watching the night. And somewhere a wagon is already rolling. Years past. That's what time does when it can't erase something. It stacks days on top of wounds and hopes you stop counting. Hannah aged into a woman people listened to, not because she raised her voice, because when she spoke, she didn't waste words. She had that calm that comes from surviving something meant to erase you. Jacob's hand stayed strong. He built houses for other people's families, solid frames, straight lines, work that said, "I'm still here." But even in quiet towns, the game kept moving. A badge here, a new law there, a man promoted, a man excused, a man cleared of wrongdoing. Different names, same posture. One evening, years after Memphis, Hannah was walking home from the schoolhouse when she noticed a wagon slow as it passed her. Nothing dramatic, just a pause, a look, two white men inside. One of them glanced too long. The wagon rolled on. Hannah stood still for a moment, heart steady, eyes sharp. She didn't run, she didn't panic. She memorized the sound of the wheels. That night she told Jacob. He nodded once. You think it's him? Hannah shook her head slowly. Doesn't matter, it's his kind. She understood now what the old women had always known. Oppression doesn't need one villain. It needs a system that forgives itself. Hannah never chased revenge. She didn't need it. She did something quieter, more dangerous. She remembered. She told the story when people said that was a long time ago. She told it when they said that wasn't like that. She told it when they said you should be grateful, because memory is a weapon that doesn't rust. And silence is the only thing the night really needs to keep winning. Somewhere, maybe Alabama, maybe Mississippi, maybe a place with a new name and an old soul, a man like Mercer stood in front of a mirror, pinning on authority, telling himself the world still worked the way it should. And somewhere else, a woman like Hannah taught another generation how to see the trap before it closed. The game didn't end, but neither did the resistance. And that's what kept the night from owning everything. The dangerous thing about time is it makes people comfortable. It convinces them that what survived one generation won't reach the next. Hannah never fell for that. She watched the way laws changed their language but not their intention. How a man could be called sheriff instead of patroller and still walk the same streets, still stop the same bodies, still sleep clean at night. She saw it in the papers, in the quiet stories passed hand to hand, in the way certain men learned early how to lower their eyes, how to move slow, how to disappear before trouble decided they were worth the effort. One winter evening long after Memphis, a letter arrived. No return name, just her address written careful, too careful. Inside was a single line. Some fires never go out. Be careful who you teach to remember. Hannah sat at the table for a long time with that paper between her fingers. Jacob read it once and burned it in the stove without a word, but Hannah knew what it meant. Someone, somewhere, still knew her name, still knew what she'd taken from them, still remembered the ledger. That night she dreamed of iron bars again, of oil lamps swinging, of a calm voice saying, "This belongs to me." She woke before dawn, heart steady, mind clear, because fear only works when it surprises you. And Hannah Blackwell was done being surprised. She dressed, stepped outside, and looked down the street the way a general studies terrain. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, beyond the years, men were still playing the same game, convinced history would protect them. She smiled once, slow and knowing, because the truth has a long memory, and somewhere ahead another door was already creaking open. Hannah never replied to the warning. That was the first move. Men who trade in fear expect noise, panic, retreat. Silence scares them more than shouting ever could. She folded the memory of that letter into the same place she kept Memphis. Not buried, filed, labeled, ready. Years later, when her hair had silver in it and her walk carried the weight of survival, people still came to her doorstep. Quiet knocks, careful voices. A boy stopped by once, hat in his hands, eyes darting like the street might answer for him. "They took my uncle," he said. "Police say he ran." Hannah didn't gasp, didn't rage. She poured water, sat him down. "Tell me who," she said. "Tell me where, tell me when." That's how resistance really works. Not marches, not speeches, documentation, memory, patterns. She taught people how to write things down. Names, times, badge numbers, routes. Who laughed, who looked away, who stayed quiet. She taught them to survive encounters without surrendering their minds. And quietly, without uniforms or titles, Hannah became something the system hates most. A witness who wouldn't disappear. Somewhere down south, Mercer died in a bed, not a cell. No trial, no reckoning. Men like him rarely get one. The system doesn't eat its own. But Hannah understood something deeper. Justice doesn't always arrive with handcuffs. Sometimes it arrives as inheritance. As stories pass too clearly to be rewritten. As children who grow up already knowing the shape of the trap. On her last evening, Hannah sat by the window, watching the street settle into night. Wagons still rolled. Men still walked with purpose and secrets. Power still shifted hands. She wasn't naive. But she wasn't afraid either. Because somewhere not far away, someone else was noticing details, counting steps, asking the wrong questions at the right time. The game kept going, but so did the memory. And that meant the night never fully belonged to them again. The night Hannah died, nothing dramatic happened. No sirens, no fires, no men kicking in doors. That's how power prefers it when it loses, quiet, forgettable, deniable. She passed in her sleep, breath slowing like a tide that had finally decided it had taken enough. Jacob held her hand until it went still, then stayed there longer than necessary, like if he let go too fast the world might take something else. At the funeral, people came who'd never met her. That's how Jacob knew. They stood in the back, didn't cry, didn't speak. Just listened. Listened to the stories, to Memphis, to the warehouse, to the ledger that burned a hole through the country and then got buried under new paperwork. Afterward, one woman approached Jacob, middle-aged, plain dress, eyes sharp in the way that mattered. "She taught my father how to write things down," the woman said quietly. "Names, times, what badge did what." Jacob nodded once. "She said never trust a system that needs you to forget," the woman continued. "She said forgetting is how they reload." That night Jacob went through Hannah's things, not looking for comfort, looking for continuity. He found it in a small box under the floorboard, not a diary, not letters, lists, roots, patterns, old names crossed out, new ones written beside them. Hannah hadn't stopped watching. She just changed positions. Jacob closed the box and understood the weight she'd been carrying all along. The city outside breathed like it always had. Wagons, boots, voices that assumed tomorrow would belong to them. Somewhere a man pinned on authority and told himself he was keeping order. Somewhere else a young person noticed something wrong and didn't look away. That's how it starts. Not with shouting, with recognition. And as the night settled in, calm and confident as ever, it didn't realize something had changed. It was no longer uncontested. Because Hannah Blackwell never stopped playing the game. She just taught others how to see the board. They buried Hannah on a clear morning. No speeches from officials, no plaques, no promises carved in stone, just people. Men and women who stood a little straighter than they used to. Children who didn't fully understand why the adults were so quiet, only that something important had passed through their lives and left instructions behind. Jacob stayed until everyone else drifted away. He didn't rush grief. He let it sit beside him like an old acquaintance. That night he opened the box again, not to mourn, to continue. He didn't add poetry, didn't add anger, just facts, because facts outlive feelings. Years later, someone else would find that box, or one like it, in a drawer, under a floor, in a mind trained not to forget, and they would recognize the pattern. Wagons become cruisers, passes become papers, patrols become departments, different clothes, same night. Somewhere a man with authority would tell himself he was just doing his job, that the law was on his side, that nobody would remember the ones who vanished. And somewhere else a woman like Hannah would already be watching, counting, writing, teaching. That's the part men like Mercer never understood. Power only wins when it convinces everyone it's permanent, but memory is patient. And memory always outlives the badge. The night still moves through American streets, confident and quiet. But it no longer walks alone, because the game didn't end with Hannah Blackwell, it spread. And someone right now is seeing the whole board. Long after Hannah was gone, the city kept her habits. People didn't say her name out loud much. Names attract attention, but they used her methods. Quiet questions. Side conversations. Writing things down twice. Once to remember, once in case the first copy disappeared. In certain neighborhoods, people learned the rhythm of patrols the way farmers learn weather, which nights the stops were heavier, which officers liked to push, which ones looked away when eyes met theirs. That knowledge didn't make anyone safe, but it made them less blind. One summer night, years later, a young man stood on a corner too long, not because he was lost, because he was waiting for someone who never showed. A car slowed. An officer leaned out, voice casual, like he was asking for the time. The young man remembered a story his grandmother used to tell, about a woman who said the most dangerous moment wasn't when they shouted. It was when they smiled and acted patient. So he stepped back, asked a question of his own, loud enough for others to hear, looked around, not afraid, just aware. The car moved on. Somewhere else a report got written differently. A stop didn't happen. A name didn't get added to a list. Small things, that's how the game shifts. But the night doesn't surrender all at once. There are still places where warehouses stand empty and useful. Still men who understand how quickly a person can become unaccounted for. Still systems that prefer clean paperwork to messy truth. Every generation produces its Mercers, and every generation decides whether it will pretend not to see them. Some nights, when the city goes quiet in that dangerous way, you can almost hear the old rules whispering, reminding everyone how things used to work. Testing to see if anyone remembers. Someone always does. That's the part that keeps the night uneasy, because as long as memory walks the streets unarmed, unbadged, unafraid, the game can never fully reset. And somewhere right now, someone just noticed a door that shouldn't be open, and the night is waiting to see what they do next. The night likes patterns, same corners, same excuses, same silence after. That's why it hesitates when something breaks rhythm. In one city, years after Hannah, a warehouse burned for reasons nobody could quite explain. Official reports said accident, faulty lamp, careless hands, but people who lived nearby noticed something else. No arrests that week. No wagons idling where they used to. No names whispered and then swallowed. The men who'd been comfortable grew cautious. Not scared, not yet. Just alert in the way predators get when prey starts watching back. Some of them moved on, took new jobs, new towns, new titles. Others stayed and tightened their grip, convinced force could still solve memory. That's when mistakes happen, because systems built on fear don't know how to handle patience. They don't know what to do with people who don't panic, don't shout, don't rush to the front door when authority knocks. They don't know how to fight someone who already knows the ending of the story. Some nights the street feels normal, lights on, music drifting, people laughing like history never happened. Other nights it feels staged, too quiet, like something is being weighed. That's when Hannah's lesson matters most. You don't run first, you don't confront loud, you watch, you count. You make sure if someone disappears, the disappearance leaves fingerprints, because the night still believes it can take what it wants, and somewhere not far away it's already reaching. The question isn't whether it will try again. It always does. The question is whether this time. Someone is already standing where the trap closes. There's a moment before every trap closes. A breath, a pause, a silence that pretends to be harmless. That's the moment Hannah trained people to feel in their bones. Years after her name stopped being spoken, a man stood in a city office, flipping through paperwork that didn't sit right. Arrest logs too clean. Night reports missing names that should have been there. A pattern hiding inside the numbers. He didn't say anything, not yet. He copied the pages twice. Left one where it could be found, hid the other where fire couldn't reach it. Across town, a woman noticed her brother hadn't come home. She didn't wait 3 days, she didn't wait for permission. She went straight to the places Hannah would have gone first. Streets, doors, people who watched more than they talked. By the second night, 5 names were written down. By the third, someone realized all 5 had been seen near the same block. That's when the air changed. Cars slowed. Men checked over their shoulders. Conversations stopped when strangers entered the room. The night felt crowded, like too many eyes were open at once. Somewhere a man with authority felt it. That tightness in the chest. That sense that the board had shifted and nobody had announced it. He told himself it was nothing. Told himself people forget. They always do. But the night didn't feel owned anymore. It felt contested. And in that uneasy space between confidence and panic where power starts making mistakes, a door creaked open that wasn't supposed to. Inside was a ledger. Different ink. Same handwriting of control. And somewhere far away in the quiet place where memory lives, Hannah's lesson waited patiently, because the game was about to demand another move. And this time it wasn't sure who would make it first. The men who found the ledger didn't celebrate. That's how you know they understood what they were holding. No shouting. No victory speeches. Just a long silence, the kind that settles when everyone in the room realizes the floor beneath them isn't solid anymore. Names filled the pages, dates, routes, not just who was taken but who signed off, who drove, who looked the other way. A web so clean it felt intentional, too clean to be an accident. One man ran a finger down a column and shook his head slowly. "This isn't new," he said. "It's just updated." Outside, the night kept pretending nothing had changed. Streetlights buzzed. A siren passed somewhere far off. A patrol car rolled by like it always had, confident, unbothered. But confidence cracks when it isn't earned. Someone leaked a page, just one. Not enough to explain the whole thing. Enough to ask the wrong question in public. Why were these names missing? Why did the same officers keep appearing at the edges of disappearances? Why did the report stop where the people stopped? By morning, the whispers were louder than the denials. By evening, someone had been reassigned. Another put on leave pending review. Language softened. Statements got careful. That's when the threats started. Phones ringing with nobody on the line. Doors checked twice at night. A note slid under a windshield that said nothing more than, "You don't know what you're touching." The night doesn't like being exposed. It prefers shadows, not spotlights. Somebody panicked, made a move too fast, tried to bury the ledger instead of letting it fade. A fire broke out in a building that wasn't supposed to matter, but fires draw attention, and attention brings questions. Somewhere in the chaos, a younger voice spoke up, not angry, just clear. "My uncle didn't run," the voice said. "He was taken." That sentence landed heavier than any accusation, because it wasn't loud, it was precise. And precision is dangerous. In a quiet office, a man stared at a badge on his desk and realized it no longer protected him the way it used to. Across town, someone else packed a bag not to escape, but to move first. The board was shifting again. And the night, for the first time in a long while, wasn't sure where the next shadow would fall. By the time dawn came, nobody believed the story anymore. That's the thing about lies, they don't collapse all at once. They fray, threads pull loose. Someone notices the seam doesn't match, and suddenly the whole thing looks handmade instead of inevitable. An officer didn't show up for roll call. Another called in sick and never came back. A third lawyered up before anyone officially accused him of anything. Guilt moves faster than justice ever does. The ledger was copied again, and again. Passed hand to hand, not as a document but as a warning. You couldn't burn it now. Too many eyes had memorized its shape. The night tried to respond the way it always had. Pressure, intimidation, isolation. But intimidation doesn't work once people stop believing they're alone. A church opened its doors and didn't close them. A teacher canceled class and took notes instead. A clerk misfiled something on purpose. None of it heroic on its own. Together, it was devastating, because the system depends on everyone doing just their one small job and never asking what the next job is for. Somewhere, a man who'd built his life on being untouchable realized something worse than arrest was possible. Exposure. Not trial, not prison, being known by name, by pattern, by consequence. He sat in his office long after dark, badge on the desk, ledger pages burned into his mind. For the first time, the night didn't feel like cover. It felt like a witness, and far away, so far she'd almost be forgotten if it weren't for how often her lessons resurfaced. Hannah Blackwell's work did what it was always meant to do. It outlived the men who thought they owned the dark. The game didn't end, but it changed. Because once enough people learn how to see the board, the night loses its greatest weapon. Surprise, time doesn't retire the game, it just changes the players. Hannah felt her body slow before her mind ever did. Bones complain, breath shortens, but awareness, that stayed sharp, sharper even. Age strips away noise, leaves only what matters. She started teaching without calling it teaching. A look held a second longer, a question asked twice, a pause before answering authority too quickly. Young folks didn't always understand why, not at first. "Why you always watching?" One girl asked her once, half joking. Hannah smiled. "Because things that hurt you don't always announce themselves." That girl would remember that years later on a night she couldn't explain why her skin tightened when a uniform slowed near her. Hannah never saw Mercer again, but that didn't mean he was gone. Men like him don't need names to continue. They leave instructions behind, habits, traditions disguised as common sense. Somewhere far off, he might have convinced himself he'd won. That pushing Hannah out proved something, that the system held. He would have been wrong, because Hannah didn't leave empty-handed. She left seeds, stories passed quietly, lessons hidden inside warnings. Memory folded into everyday behavior so it couldn't be confiscated or torn up like a pass on a dark road. Near the end, Jacob asked her something he'd never dared before. "If you could go back," he said, "would you still walk that road?" Hannah didn't answer right away. She closed her eyes and saw it clearly: the moonless night, the warehouse, the sound of paper tearing free. "Yes," she said finally, "but I'd walk it knowing exactly what it was." Jacob nodded. That mattered, because the danger was never the road. It was believing the road was safe just because someone said it was. Hannah understood something most systems depend on people never realizing. Control only works when it's unchallenged and unremembered. She broke the second part. When she died, it wasn't marked by headlines, just a small gathering, quiet respect, people standing straighter than they realized. Someone told a story, someone else corrected a detail, another added one more piece. That's how it survives, not as history, as instinct. And somewhere right now, someone is walking a road they think they're allowed to walk. Someone is trusting a rule that was never meant to protect them. The question is whether the game is still being played. The question is, will they recognize it in time? Or will they have to learn the way Hannah did?